Welcome to the Parent Matters podcast, where we help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of parenting and equip you with tools to confidently parent your children. I'm Susan Stutzman, and today we're continuing our series on childhood ADHD. Last week we talked about supporting a child with ADHD and how to cultivate healthy relationships at home. Today, we're going to be exploring ways for caregivers to support their ADHD child in successful academic engagement. And to help me do that is Jon Caes, a child therapist here at Kid Matters Counseling. Welcome to the show, Jon.
Thanks, Susan. Good to be here.
So we're going to talk about supporting a child with ADHD at school. But first, can you tell the listeners a little bit about why this topic is important to you?
Yeah. Well, I work for considerable amount of time as a school social worker, but even beyond that, I've had experiences with kids that are diagnosed with ADHD, and they're wonderful, spirited, passionate, beautiful children, but often they're just so misunderstood, or they're judged by sort of isolated, impulsive acts that track them, or and sometimes they can't be successful, and with targeted supports and teaching them some skills, we find that they can be much more engaged with school and be successful. That's what brings me to talking to you today about this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that you said, right, they can be more successful if we target things, because oftentimes as parents, caregivers, teachers, it can be tricky because every child has individual needs, and especially a kiddo with ADHD, they have different needs.
Absolutely.
And it's not a one size fits all if you have ADHD either. And so there can be a lot of trickiness around dealing with kids and helping them succeed. And I love that you're going to share a little bit about how to support them for their academic success, because I really see this as a team. It's as teamwork, I would say. So the kid needs a team. They need at the home, just like we talked, and they also need support at school. So let's jump in to supporting your child for successful academic engagement. Can you just shoot off?
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, I really like to initiate my work with kids with ADHD talking about strengths. So often they're, peppered with commands and corrections, and, they can cumulatively, have a kind of burdensome effect on them.
So you're saying that you encourage parents to help their child view ADHD from a strengths perspective?
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously liabilities too, but there's certainly strengths that need to be emphasized from the outset. And when I was a school social worker, I would get a group of kids together, and I would look at them in the eye and say, "You guys all have an amazing gift." And they were like, "Whoa," startled, like, "Me? Yeah. You're talking about me?" Yeah.
I'm sure that's not something they hear often.
Absolutely. And so they're the kids that notice if someone's absent. They're the ones that are aware if the weather changes outside the classroom window. They're the ones that notice if anything's awry in the classroom, or if someone left early, or someone's not doing their work. These kids see everything. And that's maybe part of their problem too.
Yeah. But you're sharing with them that's a gift.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So how does this look in a classroom though? Like you say you have this gift, then what's next?
Right.
What do you say next?
So every kid is unique and individual in terms of the manifestation of some of these ADHD symptoms, but there's some hallmark of things like distractibility that are germane to all of them, and some impulsivity, especially with some of the externalizing kids. We start with, looking at, like, wow, you see everything. Attention is kind of binary. We all have this misconception as an adult that we can multitask and everything, but neuroscience is showing us that really you're just doing one thing and then one thing at short intervals of time.
Oh, yeah. And if you're trying to do two things at once, you really are distracted and it's not,
Right.
you're not
Exactly.
really able to give your attention to it.
So our kiddos with ADHD often don't have that capacity to, sustain focus
So they
on one thing.
flip-flop or
They're
modulate.
flip-flopping more.
Okay.
So we have to support them with some tools and strategies to be able to do that.
And so you explain it just like that. You have this great gift. And with that also comes a great challenge.
Absolutely.
We have to learn how to focus our attention and sometimes shut those things out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. And do you, I know you've worked in the school system a lot. So can you give me an example of like how not only a parent or a caregiver could help this, a child begin to think about this, not only like what you shared, but also, in a way where they can begin to utilize tools maybe in the classroom. I know kids have specific needs, right? And specific ways they may need to focus depending on their development or their age. And I don't want to jump the gun if you're going to talk about that, but I guess that would be my next question.
Sure.
Because what do you do after you know this, right? This is me.
Right.
I have this great gift, but I also have this challenge.
Yeah.
What do I do with it?
Right. To begin with, identifying how it really portrays itself in the student or the child. For example, we have a lot of kids with ADHD that don't really get noticed, particularly in girls. And
the diagnosis doesn't get noticed, or they're just like...
It can be both, but often undiagnosed too,
okay.
where they're completely distracted and have a really hard time following the teacher, but it's very passive. They're not the interrupters. They're not yelling out and being impulsive. And
would that be then classified as ADD?
Yeah, in the old way, yes, yes.
But now it's only ADHD, and it's on a spectrum continuum.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So it's a very confusing diagnostic categorization. They're all called.
Okay, so ADHD is let's just clarify for our listeners.
Sure.
You're using it as a blanket term because ADD isn't used right now.
Right. It's a sub category under the umbrella.
Under the umbrella of ADHD. Yeah. So whether your child has hyperactivity or hypoactivity, they could be diagnosed with ADHD and then have a subcategory.
Right.
Okay. So then,
there's the combined type, externalizing, inattentive, and
So there's multiple types. So it's important to realize that and categorize that. That's what you're proposing here. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So certainly
but watch out for those ones that aren't typically seen right away. Like they're not the child that's bouncing around and out of their chair.
Right. We all know that child, but I just wanted to make sure we considered all of them. And so getting back to what we were talking about, so the needs of the child that's just distracted versus the one that's externalizing, that's interrupting, that blurts out, that can't sit in their seat, that's bouncing up and down, may have a lot more needs and tools and strategies that we have to be considering for that student.
Yeah. So, just as a quick kind of interjection, as you're saying this, like thinking about needs, right? one of the things that we talked about last week about in giving commands with children at home to have successful relationships at home was talking about doing like one task at a time or giving one directive. So my mind goes to, as a caregiver or as when you're collaborating with the school or the teacher, do you talk about targeting one need at a time, like focus or body movement or different, or do you target them all at once? And can you kind of flesh that out?
Yeah, so could be multiple levels that we're working on. As you said, there's the parents can be working on things, then there's the classroom, the teacher could be doing some things, and then there's strategies and tools that the students responsible for utilizing. And
I guess no, and I get that. I think that one thing, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I just want to say one thing. Here's an example from my personal life. So I have two daughters, and they both play the violin. And oftentimes, it is. It's really fun, but it's hard. It's hard and challenging. And one of the things that we often do, because they started when they were young, is to focus on one task at a time. So it's not you're going to make sure that your bow is straight and your fingers are on the tapes,
sure,
and your thumb is down and your head is up and your knuckles are flat and your feet are flat on the floor, and because you do want all of these things to work together. But if we start with one task and then we build upon it, that is how we get a better result in violin lessons. And then if there's a weak link or there's something we want to add, we're not going to necessarily hold them to the standard the first few times that they're practicing or adding in a new task. But then we're going to ask them to begin to integrate so it builds upon, and we're doing all of it at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially younger children, having a very clear target, in school today, we want you to, work for 10 minutes, give it your best effort.
But what does best mean? I guess that's the thing. Like, do we define best? Does the teacher define best? Helping them to be like your best effort focusing, your best effort.
Yes, best effort focusing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, doing your best work and just looking at your paper and doing that for 10 minutes and then taking a break.
Okay.
And then getting a drink of water and then coming back and doing it for 10 more minutes. That's an example of a strategy that it's called chunking, or I call it 10B10, 10 minutes, break, 10 minutes.
Okay.
And it's a way of talking to these kids about an insurmountable task, like it's so big to do all this work and listen to the whole hour, but gosh, you can do anything for 10 minutes.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, so it is kind of like what I was explaining or talking about with violin, right? It's like, it's not that we don't want to hold them to the same standard as maybe a peer that does not have the ADHD diagnosis. It's how we present it, how we aid them and help them so that they can succeed in school.
Absolutely.
So you just mentioned 10B10.
Yeah.
And chunking.
Right.
Are they the same thing? Is that something?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, chunking just means I'm taking the aggregate and breaking it into small chunks.
Okay.
For completion, and you might get a short break, or maybe check off a box that you completed it. Some way of acknowledging that you completed a big chunk of work, and that you did it.
Yeah,
that's huge. So short term.
I mean, I don't have ADHD, and I like to do that.
Absolutely, we all have our lists.
I did it. Woo!
Yes. Right. But in the classroom, obviously, minimizing distractions is really important. So talking to your child, like, what are the things that you're doing when you're not listening or focusing? Yeah. And sometimes there's some specific ways that we can enhance their attention.
So tell me, what are some of your best focus strategies for kiddos?
Well, everybody knows this, but if you sit in the front row, just think about it. Like most of the kids are behind you and you don't see them. What you do see is the teacher closer and the board closer. So everybody knows this. But guess what? There's usually not a fight for the front row. But like I work with some kids and they tell me, yes, I'm in the front row, and it made such a change. Yeah. So that's good.
Okay.
Being aware of, sometimes classrooms have these blowers that make a lot of noise and they can be distracting, or being too close to the window, too close to the door, and noticing everybody that comes in or being distracted by it.
A lot of sensory input.
Yeah, while you want them to be happy and with friends, there could be a certain person that they just want to engage with instead of doing their work. So keeping in mind all of these things.
Yeah.
So
just to kind of let me stop you there just for a second. So sensory input, so like a blower on a fan of a projector, or maybe a space heater, or depending on the school building, right? The air conditioning or the heat, a window, a door.
Right.
So then that doesn't leave many spaces in the room.
No, there are places.
How do you help them focus? Do you so just to kind of flesh that out, do you ask them to identify those things that are distracting them and think about ways to focus, or do you actually give them a tool, like saying, we're going to ask the teacher, and I guess this goes into like getting accommodation plans and stuff like that, but some kids, they don't necessarily have an accommodation plan, and we'll talk about that a little later, but
sure.
But if you have some even undiagnosed ADHD, right? And you notice that your child, and a teacher notices, or you notice, or you've been collaborating with the teacher, that some of these distractions are too much sensory input. How do you help your child with that? Like, what's a strategy? Not only knowing, but also like what's next.
Well, okay, before I jump into that, I just want to say that, teachers are really want to be supportive and help your child be successful too.
Yes.
The last thing they want is to always being catching up with this kid, or having all these things. So if you were to reach out to the teacher, they could help you pinpoint what some of the distracting things are, and tell you without even thinking too hard, what's going on in the classroom with your child.
Yeah.
And they could give you some great tips, in terms of like, do more of this and less of that.
Yeah. So I thank you for mentioning that, because I'm not trying to rag on teachers at all. I think they're wonderful. I guess I'm just trying to figure out the collaboration, or how we're working with them. And if maybe I'm going to answer my own question, but is what you're talking about, of the noticing, and I would use the word preferential seating, maybe.
Yes, that's the word.
Okay, figuring out that seating arrangement. Is it sometimes different than sitting in the front, or is that typically your answer?
Oh, that's a default one, but
Okay.
but talking to the child, definitely, and they can, if they're being frank with you, they can help you understand where the problem lies in terms of the seating.
No, that's helpful. Tell me a little bit about reinforcers that you find to be helpful in focus strategies. So you mentioned about checking boxes, or being able to take a break, or go get a drink of water.
Right.
Are there any others that you think are really motivating to children?
every child's a little bit different. Some of them just need the little bit of a break, like we talked about with the chunking thing. But some others do respond to a positive reinforcement plan, and working with parents on, and with a teacher too on feedback on the day. You could have teachers often will help with giving feedback, daily feedback home or weekly feedback home on, say, work completion or, amount of instructional engagement. And, just simple little, especially for younger kids, just, we all know about the smiley faces coming home. And, today Anne did all of her work, and she got a smile. And, and so if the parent can set up something at home, and you would probably want to have it something novel, not something that's already in the child's arsenal that's available. This is something new, not something huge and expensive, but something you pull out like on the days when they're successful. And you get to have access to this toy or whatever it is, puzzle, book, game, for a half hour on the days when the teacher gives you a smiley for completing all your work. Or it may be like you worked with a teacher on setting a threshold of, say, 80% or 4 out of 5 times you're doing it. And then you, after the half hour, then you take it and put it away, and you can pull it out each time that they do it.
Yeah, so it stays novel, so you're not having to buy. I guess my mind went to, oh my goodness, I have to find something novel for
not every day. No.
No, that's helpful.
Something they can go shopping with you and get it, and then you say, okay, now this goes away until we get the good days. So
it takes a lot of collaboration then with teachers and figuring things out, making sure that we are both on the same page.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about kids and strategies that for kids that have tactile and motor needs? Because we also, I mean, like you mentioned, there's different presentations of ADHD, but a lot of times we see just an more activity or a hyperactive motor.
Yeah, there's been an explosion in the last decade or more on awareness of this issue, that kids could have sensory needs and that tactile tools can assist them with maintaining attention. And in my office, I got a huge box of things that range from squishy toys to bendy sticks to soft things to things that with little buttons. But the key is, do they work?
Are they not a toy but a tool?
Exactly, right. And unfortunately, a lot of well-meaning people have introduced things like this is the bane of school personnel, the fidget spinners, and which are very distracting, and they're pretty much banned. But and let's take an example of that. That would be a bad fidget because it really makes you want to watch it twirl. It's so interesting. And where your eyes are looking, your brain is thinking. This is a script that we really reinforce with kids.
Well, it's based in neuroscience. There's
Absolutely.
This sense of like where your attention goes. That's where the healing will happen, or that's where you'll begin to notice things and be able to make shifts or changes.
Absolutely. So we try to identify a fidget for the child that it's satisfying to hold or squeeze or touch or bend.
My favorite is like getting those Velcro command strips and putting it on their desk and just like being able to rub it back and forth, because you can take them off really easily off the desk.
Right.
Like they're not, but it's small enough that it doesn't have to be in a kid's pocket. They don't have to remember to have it on their desk or to, but it's always there with them when they're in the desk.
Absolutely.
They can come back and focus.
Yeah. So there's all these fidget. Then there's also flexible seating, it's called.
Okay.
And flexible seating, really, you can go to some classrooms and there are sofas, or you can sit on a beanbag, or you can sit on a ball, or a ball that's supported with a tripod. Some have backs, some don't. There's cube chairs. There are a lot of different seating options that are available nowadays, rather than just the traditional chair and table or chair and desk.
Yeah, and I know especially right now, because at the time that we're recording this, a global pandemic is going on. It's a little trickier for teachers to offer flexible seating.
This is a hopeful podcast.
But this is a hopeful podcast, you're right. I do want to just name that what you said earlier about teachers wanting to see kids succeed, working with parents is the majority of our teachers, especially in elementary school. And so if there is a need and your class or your child's class doesn't offer flexible seating, I just want to say, here's a little tip, is that a lot of times, like, Played Against Sports might have yoga balls with tripods, or Goodwill or Salvation Army, right? So you could potentially get some and clean them, or, get them if you can't afford a brand new one or a few brand new ones, but go on the hunt and see if you can work with the teacher, depending on the school district that you're in, to be able to talk about how you can get those in your kid's classroom if there aren't those options already available.
Right. But often they are.
Yeah, often they are. You're right.
But again, it takes some work. You don't want to just rush out and get some bouncy thing to sit on.
Right. I'm sorry, I should have caveated that.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying, if you're trying different things and maybe there's only one or two flexible seating options, I should have started that with, sometimes it can be helpful to just try new things, but it can be expensive.
Okay. Yeah.
Like to buy every single flexible seating option and try and see how it works or how it helps your child.
Right.
Or maybe one or two might work one week and then the next week they need something different.
Right. And then, so also keeping data then on how the use of the tool or the use of the seating is good, and so, Anne, we're going to be watching and see how you do your work this week now that we've introduced this tool, and if it's not helping, then why bother?
Yeah, and then you can help them talk and work through organizational habits. So you can even help them organize. Is this helping you? Is this working, right? Organizing not only like their selves, right? Like, let's organize how we get to school, how we make sure that we are comfortable, we're using the tools, etc. But on the flip side, like, it takes organization for a parent and for a teacher to be able to offer these things. But our children who have ADHD often struggle with organizational skills themselves, so they need a lot of reminders, and things are lost, or they forget that they're doing they're sitting on the tripod ball this week. Right. So how do you help with kiddos, especially with the organizational needs that come along with so many children and their ADHD diagnoses?
Yeah, before I just jump into that, I want to just also emphasize that, by having this check-in and talking to your child about, these tools and things, you're fostering their sense of autonomy too, and they're engaged in the plan. It's not just being done to them by the teacher or the parent. Today you're going to do this. They're working with you, and you're listening to their feedback on the use of these tools. And that can be motivating, and sometimes that's a really big piece too, the motivation. So getting to organization.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. So getting to organization, that is obviously the downfall of a lot of kids. How many times as a parent does your heart sink when you got that note from the teacher saying, Anne didn't turn in her homework. Sorry to pick on Anne today. Anne didn't turn in her homework, and then you find it crumpled up in her backpack at the bottom somewhere, and no one knew it was there.
Yeah, and I will say, even for like, you get that note, the parents just like, ugh, like,
Right.
okay, and then sometimes it can be difficult to just like pull up, okay, let's work on problem solving, like what's something that worked when, or when have you been able to turn the homework in, and when, what was different about that today, and how can we work to do that? But do you have any tips on how to help kids with organizing themselves?
Well, certainly, depends on their age a lot. But two tips to keep in mind are, making things very visual and very routine. So on the visual side, writing things down, having schedules, using colors, can really reinforce, a pattern of things that the child can lock in, and it makes it much easier to remember. The routine is so important. Putting this is the time when we work on this, and then we put it back into the right folder, and we put that folder in your backpack. We do it that night. We don't wait till the next morning when you're not focused on your work and you're focused on whatever's going on when you wake up and all that it takes to get to school, because then you're not really going to be in tune with, did I put this in the right place, etc.
Oh my goodness, yes. And that feels kind of incriminating to me as a parent. But I just want to name that, it's always a work in progress, regardless of if you have ADHD kids or not, with organization and figuring out what works, but not just, being willy-nilly. So, because it also is a way to help your children learn organization if you're organized too. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be rigid about everything, but helping them to know when we do homework, when we do practice, when we are eating dinner, when we're right. And even if we need a little wiggle room, or if there's, we can have margin, because things are going to change. There's going to be things that come up, right? If we are working towards organizing that for them, then it becomes much more predictable and stable, and then you get better results. So it totally works together. And I know I'm just repeating what you said last week, but light bulbs are like going off.
Yeah. So then, and then one thing you brought up last week that really is germane to this too is being realistic too. Don't expect your child with ADHD to be able to knock out not only all of today's work plus this and that, and go to soccer and and have, make a reasonable schedule. They need downtime.
Have no margin or have no downtime.
Absolutely.
And then expect them to be thriving and be at the top of their class.
Right. Absolutely.
And have the perfect relationship and wonderful success at school. Great
intentions, wonderful thoughts, but, can't do everything, especially on a school night.
Yes.
Oh, just another tip on here, too, is sometimes little things can trip up kids with ADHD, like, oh, you didn't bring home the book, or, oh, you don't have that handout. So whenever possible, have extra supplies, like sometimes the school, you can have that extra book, so if they forget it, you're not dead in the water. Or, find out is this online at school, So if you're staying abreast of what's going on with your child's school and how materials are being delivered, you can help access them. Many parents, especially don't, kind of understand, especially as they get older, how to access some of these things. Then they don't have the resources when things happen like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I just was, kind of getting a deer in the headlights look because over here, because I'm like, oh my goodness, it's a full-time job for parents.
It could be very overwhelming, we talked about.
Keeping their children organized, keeping an extra set of things, making sure different things are happening. But I know that in regards to school and schooling, there are different ways to get your child additional helps. And so I want to talk about 504 plans and IEPs before we go. But before we do that, let's pause just for a quick break.
Okay.
Because I want to tell our listeners about a free resource that we have. And it can be really helpful for parents with ADHD because sometimes with so much work, so many different things, strategies, we have a hard time making time to play. So this podcast is brought to us by the 5-Day Parent Challenge. Many parents and caregivers struggle to feel connected to their children. We're so busy with school and work, and we often forget to take time to just connect and have fun with our kiddos. That's why we've put together a free 5-Day Parent Challenge where I, Susan Stutzman, will send you 5 emails, each with a high-impact, easy-to-do activity that you can do in 5 minutes or less to create that meaningful connection. Just go to our website to find it, kidmatterscounseling.com/challenge, and download the free 5-Day Parent Challenge today. They grow up so fast, so don't wait. We guarantee big smiles, laughter, and connection. Just go to kidmatterscounseling.com/challenge.
Sounds like fun.
Yes, I think it is. Okay, so also, I just want to note a little disclaimer that the topics discussed on this podcast and in this podcast should be considered a matter of personal opinion. They don't reflect professional advice. If you or your child is in need of mental health counseling support, please, please, please search out a licensed counselor in your area. Okay, Jon.
Yes.
We're gonna talk last in this podcast on supporting our child with ADHD in successful academic engagement on 504 plans. How do you get them?
Yeah. So
what do you do with them? How do you
Sure.
continue to advocate?
Right, and that's the key, advocating.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find that despite introducing, a couple of the strategies and tools we discussed, that you're not seeing the growth or stimulating the focus or getting a successful result, it may be time to start thinking about a 504 plan, which is an accommodation plan based on a medical diagnosis. So in this case, if you have the diagnosis of ADHD and it can document that for the school.
And you can, and just for our listeners, it's a document that you have to get through a neuropsych evaluation, not through just a doctor saying this kid has ADHD.
No, doctor can also furnish that. Yeah.
A pediatrician can.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be, that's a misconception, is that you have to have a thorough, expensive evaluation.
Oh, I'm glad I asked. Okay, so you, in your years and years of experience as a social worker working with kids with ADHD, you, just so I'm getting this correctly, you've found that especially like schools that you've worked at, elementary schools, as long as you have a diagnosis from a pediatrician?
For a medical professional.
So even a counselor or a social worker?
I think so.
They can apply for a 504?
Yeah.
So you don't have to get a full neuropsych workup.
What you have to do is you have to contact your school district in writing.
Okay.
And request it.
A 504
A 504. So maybe just a little background here. So a 504 is an accommodation plan. It lists different things like we talked about, preferential seating, the ability maybe to take breaks, to have alternative settings for test taking, to avoid distractions, to take breaks. I don't know if I said that.
Yeah.
Other things like that. So the good part about having this is then, it's being kept tracked, and the teacher is responsible for implementing the 504, and they have a copy of it, and they get it. It becomes like a little handbook for your child, on what works, and how to fulfill some of the learning needs.
And sometimes just as I'm thinking about this, one of the things as a counselor that I often do is if the parent has advocated for a 504, I've often asked for a copy so we can talk about how to also advocate. A child can advocate for those if they need them, because sometimes, again, I love and respect teachers, but no teacher, no parent can see every need at all times.
Sure.
So helping a child to, again, have autonomy and say, I need that 5B5 or 10B10, right?
Right, 10B10, you got it.
Okay, so
for younger kids, it could be a 5B5.
Okay, yeah, no, that's helpful. Okay, so 504 is what's the can you just kind of flesh out what's the difference between 504 and an IEP?
Yeah, so an IEP is
IEP stands for
individual education plan, and it's part of the special education process.
Okay.
So it's much more intense.
The IEP is.
The IEP, and it requires, first of all, you would have to request it from your school district, and then they would have to accept it or reject your request. And then if they accept it, then they would do an evaluation.
So a neuropsych evaluation, or just
a multidisciplinary evaluation at school.
Okay.
So it would, and then you would sit down with the school team and go over what components that you would want to address in this evaluation. So no evaluation is the same. You custom determine the scope of that evaluation with the school team.
Okay, because kids with ADHD can also have co-occurring diagnoses, like speech needs or OT needs, or reading helps or what have you.
Learning disabilities.
Right. Not saying that they do, but that's where it would be addressed in an IEP versus a 504 is just accommodations, like the flexible seating or the 10B10. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, and the 504 is where you don't need that full evaluation.
Right.
Typically.
For most kids with ADHD, a 504 is sufficient.
Okay.
There are some, where maybe, like you say, it's a little bit more going on, or the level of the ADHD is so intense.
Yeah.
That more supports, classroom supports could be needed, and in that case, an IEP, would be indicated.
Yeah.
But again, you have to request from the school, request an evaluation, and then the evaluation occurs, and then that suggests, different areas of needs, and then the parent has to consent to those before they can be implemented.
Sure, yeah. And I know sometimes it can be also really tricky for a parent to know where to start. So there are there are people that are actually educational advocates that sell their time or sell their expertise to be able to help you navigate this process. It's not something that we do at Kid Matters, but...
Sure, but, again, there's a little bit of misconception about that, too, because if you just reach out to your school district, I would say most of the time they're more than happy to help you and walk you through what you need. You don't have to pay for, an outside person advocate.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a really helpful thing to address because, sometimes parents are intimidated because they don't necessarily know what they can have. And then, we are bombarded all the time with, this could help you, or this could, make the process easier, or this and that. But if you don't really need it, or, it's...
Right. The school has a shared interest in helping your child be successful, too.
No, that's helpful. Well, Jon, wow. Thank you so much for joining me. If you want to get in touch with Jon, ask him any more questions, please visit our website, kidmatterscounseling.com, and look under therapists profiles. And you can email him, Jonathan@kidmatterscounseling.com. You can always just email us directly at kidmatters, intake or front desk at kidmatterscounseling.com to ask your questions, look for resources. We have a ton of resources and parent podcasts and blogs on different topics. This has been so enlightening, and I just want to say thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about how to help parents and caregivers really help their children succeed at school.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, all right, folks, thanks for listening. If you found this conversation useful, subscribe to the podcast, and please join me again next time for the Parent Matters podcast. And remember, don't parent alone.